SuperGiant Games are the developers behind Hades, and Hades is a sublime, incredible game. There's a Hades review on this channel, and it's just me explaining what makes the game so incredible. But before Hades took the world by storm, SuperGiant released a game called Pyre. Some people say that Pyre, rather than Hades, is the studio's best work. Well, at least one person said that, which was enough to convince me that I had to buy it, play it, and review the game immediately. And so here we are. Pyre is quite unique in its concept and delivery. The game follows a group of exiles that have been banished from the civilized Commonwealth, magically cast away and forced to live out their remaining days in the harsh and unforgiving wilderness of the realm known as the Downside. With the player's help and the guidance of the stars themselves, a group of these exiles seek their freedom. That's nothing too unusual as video games go. That's not to say that the story that SuperGiant have for us is shallow or played out. Far from it, in fact. My point is just that it sounds like a pretty standard premise for an RPG or an action-adventure game. But Pyre isn't an RPG or an action-adventure game. Your band of exiles don't fight, kill, or even puzzle their way out of their predicament. Pyre is, at least in part, a pseudo-sports game. You encounter adversaries throughout, but rather than face them in mortal combat, you face off 3 against 3 in an elaborate game of magic basketball, trying to slam a celestial orb into the opposing team's pyre enough times that it gets extinguished, while they try to do the same to your own. Holistically, the game essentially plays out like a visual novel, punctuated regularly with games of NBA Jam. I didn't know that going into it, and my first impression as it started to unfold was that it was a pretty weird mix and doesn't necessarily work. Even as I wrapped up the end of the game, that thought still lingered. I just couldn't escape the feeling that the game is built upon a foundation that doesn't really work. Even so, the dodgy foundation doesn't stop SuperGiant from flexing their outstanding talents. It's loaded with compelling characters, gorgeous painterly art. I already miss hearing the music. I'm full of so much admiration for the way that they tell stories through video games. Not just the substance of the story, but the way that they deliver it. So, all in all, this is a strange game. A flawed concept that's stacked with endearing qualities. That gives me quite a bit to talk about, so stick around for the rest of this spoiler-free review if you want to know more. SuperGiant are a team of artists with fantastic talent. I'm really grateful that I get to experience their work, and not envious at all of their ability. Well, maybe a little bit envious. I wish that I could draw or make music or any of that cool stuff that they can do. Like all of their games, Pyre doesn't set out to push the boundaries of consumer technology. Performance is a total non-issue, and there's not even a graphics settings menu to speak of. But the craft that goes into the game is exquisite. The colourful hand-painted art brought to life is plain to see in this video, and the music, it's interesting that it doesn't really sound like the music from Hades, but it is very apparent that it's from the same composer. Aaron Korb has done the music for all of SuperGiant's games, and I will play any game that he composes for in future as well. The music contributes so much to the atmosphere and the personality of the game. The storytelling in Pyre is the central appeal and the main reason to keep on playing it right through to the finish. It's clear that a lot of thought has gone into the world, not just what you see on your adventure, but everything that's kept out of sight as well. And just as much thought goes into every character and how they fit within it. Characters, those in your team and those that you meet along your adventure, are portrayed with still images, and they're not voiced beyond a bit of light, Simlish murmuring. Yet they carry more charm and charisma in their design and writing than most games could hope to achieve, and they all fit into the world perfectly. There's a depth and coherency to the lore of Pyre, and that's really important to me. I will say against it that at times it does feel like the writers are contorting themselves to try to justify the pseudo-sport element of the game. But they can go ahead and add contortionists to their resumes because they manage to do that without really compromising or undermining anything. Having a compelling world and story requires talent in itself, but what really elevates the narrative is the way that SuperGiant let their stories unfold, gradually dripping detail, giving little glimpses of the depths not yet revealed, while simultaneously framing the immediate story beat. Dialogue is initially quite brisk. The characters express a lot, but they're concise and efficient with words. and still somehow manage to attach heaps of personality. They never overindulge in word salad, never overwhelm the player with massive lore dumps. This is where the consistency of the setting and the story really matters, because it affords the writers opportunities to dangle hints in natural dialogue and to build intrigue, and the writers take those opportunities masterfully throughout. As a player, you pick up on little details about key characters and happenings that don't yet have a name or presence, and you get to watch all of the pieces fall into place along your journey. This section of the review covers the most gamey part of the game, the pseudo-sport that the game refers to as the rights, but that I refer to as Orb Jam. All of the action in Pyre is delivered through games of Orb Jam. I won't spell out exactly how it works, because that knowledge is only useful if you actually play the game, and in that case the game will teach you. But the crux of it is that you need to pick up the Celestial Orb and run it into your opponent's Pyre. Characters all have an aura around them. Contact with that aura gets you banished from the game for a time, and those auras can also be cast forwards offensively. The orb carrier has no aura, so they're particularly vulnerable as they try to score. There's different stats that dictate the size of the aura, the speed of the character, how long they stay banished and such. There's also some intricacies beyond that, with different character types bringing unique abilities and different strategies to the fore, and even light RPG mechanics that let you rank up and customize as you work through the game. Quite critically, you can only control one of your 3 characters at a time. Now, I know that sounds obvious, but typically in actual sports games, the CPU will take over the characters that you're not controlling and keep them moving in support. In Orb Jam, the uncontrolled characters specifically stand completely idle. The game presents this as ultimate coordination, 3 characters being of one mind, which is kind of funny. They do share one mind, but certainly not in the sense that they're coordinated at all. It feels quite the opposite. The computer opponents also play by those same rules, with only one character active in any given moment. In practice, this mechanic makes the game feel a little bit stilted. It doesn't really have a very natural flow to it. Oftentimes you're just taking a fast character and sprinting past static opponents, and I definitely never felt like a coordinated triumvirate. I just had 3 characters queuing up to independently have a crack at the other team one by one. I played through the campaign with an awareness that Versus was an option in the main menu, so my working assumption was that the game was intended as an esport. I speculated on how high-level play would unfold, what kind of strategies people would employ when they'd surpass the entry-level scruff gameplay that I was exhibiting. Maybe it wouldn't look or feel stilted in the hands of the expert. As it turns out, the Versus mode is offline only, and there is no high-level esport play to speak of, so I can only really judge the game on those merits, or rather, I can't say for certain if there is more to it than meets my capability. Orb Jam isn't completely bereft of fun. Some of the mechanics are quite novel, and there's some satisfaction to be had when you plunge into the enemy's Pyre or banish their entire team. I don't feel compelled to go and have a game of Orb Jam outside of the campaign setting. I would say that's the biggest thing that holds Pyre back from the kind of greatness that I attribute to Hades. The campaign mode of Pyre is quite novel and quite visual. I've not really played much in the way of visual novels, but I would say that Pyre fits quite comfortably into that genre. Or at least it does if you set aside the games of Orb Jam, which I suppose you can't entirely, as they're not in any way an optional part of the game. Your adventure unfolds on an artistically depicted map of the downside. You're not really free to roam, but rather the game gives you a number of choices of route as you navigate. At each stopping point, you're given opportunities to interact with various characters and the items that you collect along the way. But again, it's not freeform. You're presented with static scenes and a soft cursor, while the game determines which characters show up wanting a conversation. A quick note on that soft cursor: Pyre can be played entirely with a controller or with a keyboard and mouse, but it would have benefited from leaning into its control schemes fully. I don't really want to play Orb Jam with a keyboard and mouse, it just doesn't suit it. And I never want to move a soft cursor about with a controller. But even with some of the controller shortcuts in place, the game feels like half of it is designed for a controller first, and half of it for a keyboard and mouse first. This isn't massively detrimental. I think I'll probably be okay given enough time to heal, but it contributes to the two sides of the game feeling a little bit disjointed. Anyway, back to those characters that show up for the conversations. I already mentioned SuperGiant's knack for endearing characters and great writing, so now I'm talking more mechanically. There are choices to be made in some of the conversations that you have, but broadly speaking, these conversations are the mechanism to tell you the story rather than have you steer it. Consequences of your actions and the branches that the story can take are told through these interactions, but this isn't where they're set in motion. The vehicle for affecting the story is actually the games of Orb Jam. The story arcs of both your own team players and your various rivals are determined by the results of Orb Jam. If you're defeated in the pseudo-sport confrontation, it's not game over, load checkpoint. You press on, and the outcome influences the story, both in terms of individual character arcs and the grand scheme of things. All of your rivals each have their own motivations and story arcs as well, so while you naturally play to win, you're actually making key decisions through the results of the games. I like this kind of organic decision-making element a lot, at least in concept. In practice, the default mode in the game is quite easy, and you even have the option to restart the games of Orb Jam if they're not going in your favour. I think the game would have benefited from a more strict touch on this. A bit of tough love to inflict some defeats could have made the story feel more personal. Deliberately throwing the game so that a rival you like can prosper is unnatural. The campaign also features some very light RPG character development elements. The characters in your team can earn their way up to level 5, and they have unique skill trees that focus on enhancing their specific playstyle. And the perks and trinkets, they do have some moderate impact. There's not really that much more to be said on that. Pyre costs about 17 quid or $20 at the time of this review, and that's the whole package, nice and simple. You can buy the soundtrack separately if you want to, but there's nothing else that you can throw money at. No costumes, DLC, battle passes or anything like that. What you get in that pack is a campaign that probably takes 12 to 15 hours to get through, and it's somewhat replayable if you want to explore the different possible outcomes. Realistically, you'll probably get the best outcome at the first time of asking, so playing further really depends on your own curiosity. The game also features offline multiplayer to allow you to engage in the pseudo-sport Orb Jam gameplay against a friend or against a computer for practice games. But I wouldn't say that it lends itself to pick up and play sessions. Both players would need to have some familiarity with the game to have fun with it, so that's going to be quite niche. Pyre is not a massive game, and it doesn't push the boundaries of technology, fidelity or ambition. It's quite modest in scope, which isn't something that I say is a negative, but just a detail that needs to be reflected for the rating to make any sense. So I'm giving it a D for scope. The score for execution is bolstered by the fact that the quality is so very high in most regards. The art, music, characters, world building and delivery are all excellent. I'm thoroughly enamoured by the studio as a whole. At the same time, I have to recognise that the core concept of the game doesn't really come together for me, and the esport element of the gameplay, when taken on its own, doesn't quite stick the landing. Pyre is a flawed idea, beautifully realised. That's hard to represent with a number, but I'm settling on a 70. So for me, Pyre scores a D70 under the Gaming Arcadia review system. And no, it's not better than Hades. Thank you for taking the time to watch my review. You can hit the like button if you want, or not. If you've played Pyre or think that you might off the back of this review, please let us know in the comments. And consider joining our Discord server linked in the video description. It's an awesome community to be a part of. See you next time.